Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
And today we are in Note Lab mode.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that we are taking material that you have sent to us
Exactly.
and doing a deep dive into it. For this episode, we are talking about The Bonfire Moment
Mm-hmm.
by Martin Gonzalez and Josh Yellin.
Okay.
Um, and it is chock full of really fascinating insights about why startups succeed and why they fail.
Yeah, I think people are really interested in that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's something that I think we all kind of wonder about, like, what is it that makes some startups just take off
Right.
and others just, kind of fizzle out?
Yeah. And this book really pulls back the curtain, I think, in a way that a lot of other, kind of business books don't.
Yeah, it's not all like, rah-rah, like, here's how to be successful.
Right.
It's like, let's look at the messy reality
Yeah.
of what it actually takes to build a company.
Yeah. And speaking of messy reality,
Yeah.
before we dive into all of that,
Okay.
we want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Cloudfit.ai.
Cloudfit.ai.
Cloutfit.ai.
Got it.
And they are doing some really interesting things in the world of B2B fashion commerce.
Okay.
So they are using AI to help businesses engage users and drive revenue.
It's amazing how AI is transforming so many industries now.
I know, it's everywhere you look.
Yeah, and fashion is no exception.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in that intersection of fashion and technology, definitely check out Cloutfit.ai.
Sounds like a good one to look into.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into this book,
Right.
The Bonfire Moment. One of the first things that I think really struck me
Okay.
was this statistic that they shared. 65% of startups fail due to people problems.
Wow.
Not technology, not lack of funding, but people.
That's huge.
So
It's a real wake-up call.
it is.
That, we often focus on the product, the market, the funding.
Right.
But ultimately, it's the people
The people, yeah.
who make or break a company.
Yeah, and that's where this book, I think, really shines, is it dives into those people problems. And they call them
Yeah.
the 4 traps of startup teams.
Yeah. The 4 traps.
Yes,
I'm already feeling a little anxious.
I know, me too.
So what's the first trap?
Okay, so the first one that you highlighted in your notes was the trap of speed.
Ah, yes, the trap of speed.
So talk to me about that one.
Well, in the startup world, everything is go, go, go.
Right.
You're always racing against the clock, trying to hit milestones, get to market faster than the competition.
Right.
And that sense of urgency can be really exhilarating.
It can be.
But it can also be a trap.
So,
Because when you're so focused on speed, you can sometimes neglect the things that are essential for building a strong and sustainable team.
so it's like you're building the car while you're driving it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're so busy trying to get to the destination that you don't stop to make sure the engine is running smoothly.
Okay. I can see how that could be a problem long term. So how do you balance that need for speed with the need to, build a solid foundation for the team?
That's the million-dollar question. And I think the Bonfire Moment makes the case that it's not about sacrificing speed altogether. It's about being intentional about how you build your team and your culture even while you're moving fast.
Got it. So it's finding that sweet spot
Yeah,
between urgency and long-term vision.
exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's the next trap?
Right, so the next trap is the trap of the inner circle.
Okay, the inner circle.
Yeah, this one's interesting.
Tell me more.
So, as a founder, especially in the early days, you tend to rely on a small group of people.
Right, your trusted advisors.
Yeah, people you've worked with before,
Mm,
people who get your vision.
right, people you feel comfortable with.
Exactly. And that can be a great thing. Loyalty and shared history are valuable.
Sure.
But the danger is that this inner circle can become an echo chamber.
Oh, I see.
Everyone's kind of reinforcing each other's biases.
Yeah.
And you're not getting that diversity of thought that
Yeah.
you need to really make the best decisions.
So you're kind of missing out on those outside perspectives.
Exactly. And that can be really dangerous, especially as your company starts to grow.
Okay, so it's like you're in this bubble
Yeah,
and you're not really seeing the full picture.
exactly.
Okay, that's a good one to be aware of. All right, what's next?
Okay, so the next trap, this one's a little bit more rebellious.
Okay, I like rebellious.
It's the trap of the maverick mindset.
The maverick mindset.
Yes. So this is the founder who says, you know what? I don't need your traditional management practices.
Hmm.
I'm going to do things my own way.
I'm going to break the rules.
Exactly. And I'm a disruptor.
Yeah.
I'm going to create a whole new system.
Okay, so that sounds exciting.
It can be.
But is it always a good thing?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Right.
That maverick spirit can be really valuable in the early stages
Mm.
when you're trying to challenge the status quo. But as your company grows, that lack of structure
Right.
and clear decision-making processes can lead to chaos.
Okay, so you're saying that you need some kind of system
Yeah.
to manage that growth.
You need a system that can scale
Right.
as your company scales.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's the last trap?
Okay, the final trap. And I think this one is something that probably every founder has experienced to some degree.
Okay.
It's the trap of confidence.
Confidence.
Yeah, or lack thereof.
Okay, so which is it?
Well, it's both, actually.
Both. Okay.
It's the trap of overconfidence and self-doubt.
So you're swinging between those two extremes.
Exactly. You're either on top of the world thinking you can conquer anything,
Mm.
or you're riddled with self-doubt, wondering if you're even qualified to be doing this.
I can see how that would be a roller coaster ride.
Oh, it definitely is.
Yeah.
And it can be really paralyzing for a founder.
Yeah. So what are the dangers of each of those extremes?
Well, overconfidence can lead to poor planning. You underestimate the challenges. You're resistant to feedback.
Yeah, you think you know everything.
Exactly. And then when you inevitably hit some roadblocks, that overconfidence can quickly flip into crippling self-doubt.
Oh, so it's like a double whammy.
It really is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about these 4 traps,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important to note that the book doesn't just present them as like unavoidable pitfalls,
Right.
right? There are examples of companies that have successfully navigated these traps.
Exactly. They've figured out how to avoid them or at least mitigate their impact.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those success stories.
All right, let's do it.
I'm curious to hear what they did differently.
Yeah, me too.
So we talked about the 4 traps that can really sabotage a startup team. The trap of speed, the inner circle, the maverick mindset, and that trap of confidence. But, this book doesn't just point out the problems.
Right.
They actually offer some solutions.
They do. They provide some really practical tools and strategies.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was really fascinated by was this Bonfire Moment workshop that they developed.
Yeah, it's a really interesting approach.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, it's basically a structured program
Oh.
that helps teams kind of identify and address their unique challenges.
Okay, so it's like a tailored approach.
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Okay, and they use a variety of tools in this workshop.
Yes, they do.
And one of the tools that I am dying to hear more about is this bullshit circle.
Ah, yes, the bullshit circle.
I mean, the name itself is kind of intriguing.
It's a little provocative, isn't it?
It is a little bit.
But it's actually a really powerful exercise.
Okay, so tell me how it works.
So imagine you've got a team of people
Okay.
sitting in a circle
Right.
in a safe and supportive environment.
Okay, got to have that psychological safety.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And each person takes a turn sharing their deepest insecurities and self-doubts.
Wow. So it gets pretty real.
It does. It's about getting vulnerable.
So what's the goal of this?
Thanks.
Is it like to call people out on their BS?
No, not at all.
Though.
It's not about blaming or shaming anyone.
Okay.
It's about creating a shared understanding
Okay.
and breaking down those walls of pretense.
So it's like a collective exhale.
Yeah, exactly. It's like everyone's kind of letting go of that pressure to be perfect.
And I imagine it also helps to build trust within the team.
Absolutely, because when you're willing to be vulnerable with each other, it
Yeah.
creates a deeper level of connection.
Yeah, it's like you're all in this together.
Exactly. You're not alone in your struggles.
Okay, so the bullshit circle is all about getting real hacked,
Yeah.
dropping the act, being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
What about this user guide that you mentioned?
Yes, the user guide, this one's a little less intense,
Okay.
but equally valuable.
Okay, so what is a user guide?
Think of it as a manual for understanding your teammates.
Okay.
So each team member creates their own guide,
Okay.
and they outline things like their motivations, their work style, their communication preferences.
So it's like a set of instructions.
Exactly. It's like saying, hey, this is how I work best.
I love that because I think so often we just assume
Right.
that everyone operates the same way we do.
Exactly. And that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings and conflicts.
Yeah, so this user guide is like a way to kind of get everyone on the same page.
Precisely. It's about transparency and clarity.
And what are some of the key elements that go into a user guide?
Well, it typically includes things like communication preferences.
Okay.
So do you prefer email, Slack, face-to-face conversations?
Right.
What are your pet peeves when it comes to communication?
Okay.
It also covers work style.
Uh-huh.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Right.
do you thrive in a structured environment or do you need more flexibility?
Okay. And then I imagine there's also some bigger picture questions.
Yes, definitely things like your motivations, your values, your long-term goals.
So it's not just about the day-to-day stuff.
Right. It's about understanding what drives each person.
Yeah, and what they're ultimately hoping to achieve. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that goes into these user guides?
Yes, there's also a section dedicated to what they call breakdown scenarios.
Breakdown scenarios.
Yeah, so these are hypothetical situations that could lead to conflict or dysfunction within the team.
So it's like anticipating potential problems.
Exactly. It's like saying, okay, if this happens,
Right.
how are we going to deal with it?
So you're kind of creating a plan
Mm-hmm.
before the problem even arises.
Precisely. It's about being proactive rather than reactive.
And what kinds of scenarios do teams typically address in this section?
It can be anything, really.
Okay.
Disagreements over equity splits, time commitments,
Mm-hmm.
communication breakdowns, decision-making processes.
Well, those are all those tricky situations.
Exactly. And the user guide encourages teams to confront these potential problems head on
Okay.
in a structured and supportive environment.
So you're not just avoiding them.
Right. You're actually talking about them.
Okay, I'm coming up with a plan.
Yes. And that can be really helpful because often these are the very issues that get swept under the rug.
Right, and then they fester.
Exactly. And then they explode later on.
Yeah, so it's better to address them early on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the user guide is all about transparency, clarity, setting expectations, anticipating potential problems.
Mm-hmm.
But this workshop is just a one-day event.
Right.
So how do teams sustain that momentum after the workshop is over?
That's a great question. And that's something that the book really emphasizes.
Okay.
The workshop is just the beginning.
Okay.
It's a catalyst for change.
Right.
But it's up to the team to integrate those insights and practices into their daily work life.
So it's about making it a part of your culture.
Exactly. It's about ongoing feedback, open communication, a willingness to revisit and revise those user guides.
Right, because things are always changing.
Teams evolve, businesses grow.
Right, so you have to be able to adapt.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not just a one and done kind of thing.
No, it's a continuous process.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've talked about these tools,
Mhm.
the bullshit circle, the user guide.
Yeah.
But what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that problems are inevitable
Yep.
in any team, in any organization.
Right.
But they're not insurmountable.
Okay, so there's hope.
There is absolutely.
Yeah.
The key is to address them openly, honestly, and with a spirit of continuous learning and improvement.
So don't be afraid to have those tough conversations.
Exactly.
Right, and to create a culture where vulnerability is seen as a strength, not a weakness.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also important to remember that investing in team building and culture development is not a distraction from achieving business goals.
Right.
It's actually essential to success.
It's an investment
It is.
that pays off in the long run.
So whether you're a founder, a manager, a team member, this book has something to offer.
It does.
Yeah, it's got some really valuable insights and practical tools for building stronger, more resilient teams.
And who knows, it might even save your company from becoming another statistic.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Mm.
Speaking of statistics,
Yeah.
there's something interesting that the book touches on
Okay.
that I wanted to kind of circle back to.
All right.
They talk about how these people problems can actually fuel a company's success.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting twist, isn't it?
It is. So tell me more about that.
It's almost a little counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is.
Like we've been talking about how these issues with people can be, the downfall of a company.
Right.
But they're also saying that those same challenges can actually make the company stronger.
Yeah, it's like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm always a little hesitant, with those kind of platitudes like,
Right.
oh, you just got to, face challenges and it'll make you better. I don't know. It's not always that simple.
No, it's not.
So how do they make that case in the book?
Well, they talk about how the very things that make startups so dynamic, right? Like the fast pace, the constant change,
Right.
the pressure to innovate, like all of that can create friction within a team.
Right.
But they're saying that friction, if it's handled well,
Okay.
can actually lead to breakthroughs.
So it's like harnessing that energy, that tension, and turning it into something positive.
Exactly. It's like, instead of letting it tear the team apart,
Right.
They're using it to fuel creativity and innovation.
Okay, but how do you do that? I
Yeah.
mean, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
It's one thing to say like, oh, embrace conflict.
Yeah.
But like, how do you actually do that in a way that's productive?
Well, that's where all of the tools and the principles that we've been talking about come in.
Okay.
Like creating that culture of open communication where
Yeah.
people feel safe to disagree, to challenge assumptions. And remember that user guide exercise with the breakdown scenarios?
Well,
like that's all about anticipating potential conflicts.
Right.
And having a plan for how to deal with them.
So it's like building that muscle.
Yeah.
The conflict muscle.
Exactly. It takes practice
Right.
to get good at disagreeing productively.
Yeah, it's a skill.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, and it's not just about resolving conflict,
Right.
right? It's also about recognizing that diversity of thought can actually lead to better solutions.
Exactly, because if everyone's always agreeing,
Right.
then you're probably not pushing each other hard enough.
Yeah, it's like if two people always agree, one of them is unnecessary.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to that concept of confident humility that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
It's like being secure enough in yourself
Yeah.
to be open to other perspectives.
Right. To admit when you're wrong.
Right.
To learn from your mistakes.
And to not take things personally.
Yeah, exactly.
When people disagree with you, it's not a personal attack.
Right. It's about making the best decision for the team.
For the company, for the product.
Yeah. I love how this book really reframes these people problems
Right.
as potential catalysts for growth.
Yeah. It's a really powerful shift in perspective.
It is, because I think we often see conflict as a negative thing.
Right. Something to be avoided.
But they're saying that it can actually be a positive force.
If it's managed well.
If it's managed well, yeah, exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've talked about, the pitfalls, the strategies, the tools, the potential for growth.
Right.
But, this wouldn't be a true deep dive
Right.
without that final thought.
Yep.
Something to really make our listeners think.
All right, hit me.
So what's the takeaway challenge for them today?
Okay, so I think there are two things that I would encourage listeners to really reflect on.
Okay.
First, think about the long game.
Okay.
How can you contribute to building a culture of trust, mutual support,
Open communication in the teams that you're a part of.
right? Whether you're a leader or a team member,
Exactly.
you have a role to play
You do.
in shaping that dynamic.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number one, and what's number two?
Number 2, reflect on your own confident humility.
Confident humility. Yeah,
It's a journey,
it is.
not a destination.
And it's something that we can all work on.
How can you embrace both your strengths and your weaknesses and create an environment where you can continuously learn and grow?
I love that challenge.
It's a good one.
A challenge for the mind and for the team.
Exactly.
So on that note,
Yeah.
a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive
Yes, thank you.
into the Bonfire Moment.
It's been a great conversation.
It has, and we would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yes, please share your experiences.
Have you experienced any of these problems firsthand?
Yeah,
What strategies have worked for you?
let us know.
Hit us up on social media. We're at The Deep Dive Pod.
We love hearing from you guys.
We do.
Yeah.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives
Yes.
and all sorts of fascinating topics.
We've got some great stuff coming up,
We do.
so stay tuned.
Until next time, happy teaming.
Happy teaming.